The headlines were merciless. One week he was the face of Lima corporations, the next, a ghost hunted by scandal. Henrique didn't pack much, just enough to disappear. He bought a crumbling house in a village with no Wi-Fi and no expectations. Sometimes, vanishing is the only way to be seen again. He introduced himself as Ricardo, not because he was ashamed, but because he needed a clean page, the kind only a stranger could write on. In the heart of the sleepy town, nestled between a bakery and a florist, he stumbled across a small antique shop. Dust-covered glass, sun-faded curtains, and silence. That's where he saw her. Eva had eyes like stormy skies, quiet but never still. Her hands moved like time itself, gently brushing years of history off forgotten objects. She didn't talk much. She didn't need to. There was something about her presence that made even silence feel like a story waiting to be told. Henrique kept coming back, pretending to browse, asking simple questions. She offered brief answers, but her eyes lingered. He liked the way she spoke to the furniture, as if the chairs remembered who sat on them and the clocks mourned the moments they had lost. It was a different world, untouched by his. Eventually, he asked if he could help. "I just want to learn," he said. Eva tilted her head, unsure, then nodded slowly. It felt strange, this billionaire fixing broken chairs instead of making billion-dollar deals. But his hands were steady, and for the first time in years, so was his heart. He swept the floor, dusted the corners, sorted screws. Little tasks. And somehow, with each chore, the weight on his shoulders lightened. Eva didn't ask about his past. She didn't search for answers. Her silence gave him space, and that, oddly enough, felt more intimate than any secret he had ever shared. There was something poetic about the place. How everything broken still had a place, a story. Henrique didn't know what he was looking for when he arrived in that village. But something about Eva, the shop, the stillness, it all felt like a beginning, not an end. And just like that, the pocket watch caught his eye. It was barely visible, tucked behind a cracked porcelain vase and a tarnished candlestick. The pocket watch, its gold faded and chain tangled, seemed forgotten by time itself. Henrique picked it up instinctively. Its weight felt like memory. The hands were frozen at 2:17 p.m. It wasn't broken. It was paused. Eva noticed him holding it and quietly approached. "That belonged to Mr. Aldo," she said, almost like sharing a secret. "He came here every day after his wife passed, just to sit by the window and listen to time ticking." Her voice softened, like she was reciting a sacred story. The watch stopped the day he stopped coming. Henrique didn't speak. He simply turned the object over in his hands, as if the story had rewound him, too. That kind of stillness, he knew it. He had lived it, in crowded boardrooms and luxury penthouses. The kind of stillness where your heart moves, but the world no longer does. It stirred something old inside him. That evening, he sat by the window with a set of tools Eva had lent him. No cameras, no board members watching, just him and a frozen heartbeat in metal. Fixing the watch became more than repair. It was redemption in slow motion. It ticked again before the sun dipped beyond the hills. When Eva heard the ticking, she didn't smile right away. She listened. She touched it lightly, as if it might vanish. "You brought it back," she said quietly. There was no thanks, only connection, as if fixing the watch had mended something in both of them. After that, Henrique saw the shop differently, not as a place to hide, but as a museum of real lives, grief, laughter, memory. Every object whispered a different kind of truth. And suddenly, he wanted to hear them all. Every dusty clock, every bent spoon, every silent frame. The watch stayed on the counter, ticking like a heartbeat, no longer alone. Eva didn't ask who Henrique really was, and he didn't offer. But in that room filled with forgotten things, he was starting to feel remembered. And somewhere in the back, a chair creaked, as if inviting him to stay a little longer. The days began to blur in the soft rhythm of restoration. Henrique would arrive early, sleeves rolled, heart quieter. What started with one watch turned into fixing a cracked mirror, restoring a bookshelf, tightening the legs of a chair that once belonged to a soldier's widow. Each task carried a story, and each story found its way into his soul. The billionaire's hands, once used to signing contracts, now gently traced scratches of forgotten lives. Eva watched him, not with suspicion, but with a strange sense of trust. She began sharing more. How her father taught her carpentry, how her mother never threw away a single broken thing. Over coffee breaks and creaky stools, they swapped memories like postcards. Childhood moments, quiet griefs, silly dreams they'd once buried under practicality. And in those conversations, something human and raw began to grow between them. Henrique never spoke of his past, not out of arrogance, but out of fear that reality would shatter the simplicity he had found. He didn't want to be the man from the magazines. Here, he was Ricardo, the man who accidentally dropped a box of rusty keys, then spent an hour organizing them alphabetically just because it felt right. And Eva? She let him be. The shop changed, not in a flashy, dramatic way, but in the kind of way old friends notice when someone starts smiling again. A few loyal customers returned, drawn by the warmth of the place. Kids peeked through the glass, curious about the man painting a rocking chair blue. It was like magic, but the quiet kind. The kind you don't see until it's already wrapped around you. Henrique started leaving notes on restored pieces. Just a line. She waited here every Sunday. He laughed when he carved this. Eva never asked where he got the stories. Maybe she knew they weren't made up. Maybe she didn't care. What mattered was that the objects were no longer silent. They had voices again. Still, every evening, when he closed the door behind him, the truth lingered like smoke. He wasn't Ricardo. He was Henrique Lima, heir to an empire, a man whose face once sold watches more expensive than this entire shop. And that secret sat heavily in his chest, knocking louder every time Eva laughed at his jokes or handed him tea like he belonged there. He knew it couldn't last. Secrets, no matter how well hidden, have a way of slipping through cracks. But for now, with the scent of varnish in the air and the sound of old wood coming back to life, he stayed. And then, behind a dusty curtain near the back, he noticed something strange, something that looked familiar. It was hidden behind a stack of broken frames and water-damaged canvases, wrapped in layers of time. Henrique wasn't looking for anything special, just clearing space when the soft image caught his eye. A portrait, aged but graceful, of a woman with eyes that mirrored Eva's. The resemblance stopped him cold. There was something sacred about the brushstrokes, as if the artist had painted with love, not just color. When Eva saw in his hands, she froze. Her fingers tightened around the edge of a shelf, her eyes heavy with memory. "That's my mother," she said, barely above a whisper. "She passed when I was 16. That's the only picture I have of her." The air shifted, filled with a reverence Henrique hadn't felt in years. She took the painting from him gently, like holding a heartbeat. "I never put it out," she said. "Too many questions when people see it. Too much pain when I do." She placed it on a cloth-covered chair in the back and walked away. But the image stayed with Henrique. The smile, the softness, it lingered like perfume long after she had gone. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the painting, its chipped frame, the dust, the forgotten corners of it. He had fixed clocks, shells, lamps. But this felt different, more personal, more delicate. He wasn't sure if it was his place, but he found himself quietly restoring the frame, sanding with care, preserving every detail. For days, he worked on it in secret after closing. He repainted the edges with soft gold, filled in missing corners, cleaned the surface gently with a cloth Eva had used on her mother's teacups. He didn't want credit. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to give something back that couldn't be bought. On the morning of her birthday, he placed the restored painting in the shop's front window before she arrived. A small note rested beneath it. Some memories deserve the light. No signature, no clue, just that. When Eva saw it, she stood in silence, eyes welling up, hand covering her mouth. She didn't say a word, but something in her changed. That night, she lit a candle by the portrait, and when she looked at Henrique, she lingered, as if her heart had begun to guess the truth. He looked away, pretending not to notice. But inside, he knew the line between Ricardo and Henrique was wearing thin. And then, just like that, Fate knocked on the door wearing a tourist hat and a camera around his neck. The morning started like any other, sunlight spilling lazily across the counter, Eva humming while dusting a wooden birdcage. A tourist walked in, camera swinging, eyes scanning the shelves with amused curiosity. Henrique offered help, still hidden behind his alias. But then it happened. The man squinted and said, "Wait, aren't you Henrique Lima?" The words hit like a bell inside a cathedral, loud, impossible to ignore. Eva turned her head slowly, confusion flickering in her eyes. Henrique laughed it off, changing the subject, pretending it was a mistake. But the seed was planted. Later that day, while he went out for coffee, Eva did what any woman guarding her heart would do. She searched. It didn't take long. The internet still knew who he was, even if he had tried to forget. Articles, paparazzi photos, headlines about disappearances, scandals, fortunes. There he was in boardrooms, galas, and stock exchanges. And here he had been, sweeping her floors, holding her memories, fixing her mother's frame with hands that once signed billion-dollar mergers. When he returned, she stood waiting, phone in hand, eyes wide but steady. "Who are you really?" she asked. No accusations, just hurt. He didn't lie. He didn't justify. He said, "I was tired of being who I was. I needed something real. In this shop, you felt like truth. But for Eva, truth too late is still betrayal. You had so many chances to tell me," she said, her voice trembling. "You were honest about everything else, except the one thing that mattered most." Her words weren't angry. They were weary. The kind of tired that comes from believing in something too deeply, only to find cracks in its foundation. Henrique didn't beg. He didn't promise. He stood there, letting the weight of her silence fall. He had walked away from an empire, but hadn't realized what he'd built here. Something fragile and real. And now, with one truth, it all hung in the balance. She asked him to leave. No final words. To space where love used to grow. The door closed behind him like the final tick of a clock. The shop felt colder. The light less golden. Eva moved through the aisles like someone wading through memory. She didn't cry. Not then. But every now and then, she'd catch herself looking toward the door, wondering if broken clocks could ever tell the right time again. The seasons turned without asking permission. The shop stayed open, but something was missing, like a melody that had lost its final note. Eva kept busy, arranging shelves, polishing old glass, telling stories to strangers who didn't know hers. Customers came and went, but the silence after closing always echoed louder now. She found herself replaying his words late at night. "I needed something real." Wasn't that what they had? She wanted to be angry, but the memories kept interrupting. Him fixing the watch, laughing when the shelf collapsed under their weight, how he looked at her mother's painting like it was priceless. He never once tried to impress her. That's what made it so real. Months passed. She stopped waiting. That's when the small box appeared. No note on the outside, just a quiet presence among the donations. It was delicate, floral carvings, slightly chipped, humming faintly when she opened it. The tune was familiar. Too familiar. Her mother's favorite song, played every morning during breakfast when the world was still safe. Inside the box was a folded note, written in the handwriting she knew but never saw enough of. "For every story you shared with me, I leave one behind. I'm no longer a billionaire, just someone who found a home." She read it 3 times before she realized she was crying. Not because of loss, but because something had come back. Not just him, but something deeper. The next day, he stood outside, holding nothing but a small suitcase and the same expression he wore when they first met. Worn, hopeful, human. He didn't ring the bell. He waited. She opened the door without hesitation. No grand speeches, no apologies, just a breath between them and a quiet, relieved smile. They walked back into the shop like nothing had changed, yet everything had. The music box sat near the window, its tune dancing through the sunlight. Henrique, no longer hiding, no longer pretending, stood beside her, not as a visitor, but as someone who finally understood what it meant to arrive. He wasn't fixing broken things anymore. He was building something whole. Eva didn't ask where he'd been. She didn't need to. Some answers aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be lived. And in the soft hum of the music, among old clocks and silent photographs, they began again. Not as billionaire and shopkeeper, but as two people who had stopped time just long enough to fall in love. Have you ever felt the need to just disappear for a while? Just to find out who you really are? Do you think true love can grow even when one heart is hiding behind a lie? And if someone showed up at your door after breaking your trust, would you open it? Let me know in the comments what you would have done if you were in Eva's place. This real story is one of those touching stories that makes us question how much of ourselves we're really willing to share and how much we're willing to forgive. If this emotional story moved you even a little, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next story that could change the way you see the world.